The sun was setting over a quiet suburban neighborhood as Sarah Wilson stepped into her backyard. Her golden retriever, Max, was pacing near the fence, his eyes locked on something, or someone, on the other side. His barks echoed through the otherwise peaceful evening, sharp and relentless, as though he were trying to warn her of something she couldn't see. Sarah knelt beside Max, gently rubbing his back. "What's wrong, buddy?" she murmured. Max rarely barked unless there was a reason. He wasn't an aggressive dog. In fact, his usual demeanor was friendly and calm, but tonight, he was different. His fur stood on end, his tail stiff as he growled low and deep. She followed his gaze, but saw nothing unusual, just the quiet street behind their yard. "Come on, Max. Let's go inside," she said, tugging gently at his leash. But Max wouldn't budge. Instead, he barked louder, growling at the shadows as if trying to protect her. Sarah sighed, her curiosity piqued, but her mind brushing it off as Max being overly cautious. The next day, Sarah decided to walk Max through the neighborhood to calm his nerves. They passed familiar houses and smiling neighbors, but when they neared the corner where the new family had recently moved in, Max stopped dead in his tracks. His ears perked up, and his bark returned, ferocious, insistent, almost desperate. A man stepped out of the driveway, glancing curiously at Sarah and Max. His name was Brian, one of the new neighbors she'd yet to meet formally. He was tall and had a friendly smile, but Max's reaction to him was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. "Is he okay?" Brian asked, keeping a safe distance. Sarah tightened her grip on Max's leash. "He's usually very friendly. I don't know what's gotten into him." Brian chuckled nervously, backing away slightly. "Dogs can be weird sometimes," he said, giving Max a wide berth as he walked toward his car. Sarah apologized profusely as Max's barking grew louder. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I really don't know what's gotten into him." Brian shrugged it off. "No worries," he said with a tight smile before driving off. That night, Max's agitation returned. He stood by the living room window, growling at the empty street outside. Sarah watched him closely, her unease growing. She couldn't shake the feeling that Max was trying to tell her something. But what? A few days later, Sarah was home alone when she heard a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone and felt a pang of nervousness as she peered through the peephole. It was Brian. "Hi," he said when she opened the door slightly. "Sorry to bother you, but I think your dog dropped this." He held up Max's leash, which Sarah realized she must have left at the park earlier that day. "Oh, thank you," she said, taking it from him. But Max, who had been sitting calmly beside her, suddenly lunged toward the door, barking furiously. His reaction startled Sarah so much that she almost dropped the leash. Brian stepped back quickly, his face darkening. "You might want to get that dog under control," he said, his tone sharp. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah shaken. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Something about Brian unsettled her, and Max's behavior only heightened her anxiety. She decided to trust her instincts. The next morning, she installed a security camera facing her front yard. If something, or someone, was bothering Max, she wanted to know. Days passed, and Max's barking continued whenever Brian was nearby. Sarah started avoiding him, unsure of how to handle the situation. Then, one night, the security camera alert woke her. She grabbed her phone and opened the app to see a figure lingering near her car. It was Brian. Her heart raced as she watched him circle the vehicle, looking around nervously. Then, to her shock, he opened the trunk and began rifling through it. She realized she must have left it unlocked earlier that evening. Without thinking, she called the police, her hands trembling as she explained the situation. By the time the police arrived, Brian was gone. But they found enough evidence to suspect he had been involved in a series of recent thefts in the neighborhood. Sarah's security footage showed him clearly, and within hours, he was arrested. During the investigation, the truth about Brian came to light. He wasn't just a petty thief, he had a long history of criminal activity, including breaking into homes. Max's instincts had been spot on all along. Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and gratitude as she hugged Max tightly. "You knew," she whispered into his fur. "You knew all along." The story didn't end there. News of Max's heroics spread quickly, earning him the nickname the neighborhood watchdog. Local reporters came to interview Sarah, and Max became a bit of a celebrity. But the most rewarding moment came a few weeks later when one of the neighbors, a single mother named Lisa, approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "I didn't realize it at the time, but Brian had been watching my house too. If it weren't for Max, who knows what could have happened." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Max is a good boy," she said, patting his head. "He's always looking out for us." Max wagged his tail happily, as if he understood every word. For Sarah, the ordeal had been a stark reminder of the importance of trusting your instincts, and the unwavering loyalty of a dog who always seemed to know more than he let on. A few months later, life returned to normal in the neighborhood. Or so it seemed. Max still had his vigilant habits, often pacing the windows and sniffing at the air, but Sarah chalked it up to his protective nature. He had earned his title as the neighborhood hero, and the local kids often brought him treats when they passed by. Sarah decided to host a small gathering to thank her neighbors for their support during the ordeal with Brian. She set up tables in her backyard, prepared snacks, and invited everyone over, including Lisa and her children. The gathering was lively, with laughter and conversation filling the air. As the evening wore on, Lisa approached Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I've been thinking," she said. "It's amazing how Max sensed something was off with Brian before any of us did. Animals have such a strong intuition." Sarah nodded, glancing at Max, who was lying at her feet but still alert, his ears twitching at the slightest sound. "He's incredible," she agreed. "I don't know what we would have done without him." Just as the words left her mouth, Max suddenly jumped to his feet and let out a sharp bark. His eyes were locked on the side gate, which was slightly ajar. The laughter and chatter around the yard quieted as everyone turned to see what had caught his attention. "Max?" Sarah said, her voice tinged with concern. She followed his gaze and noticed a shadowy figure slipping through the gate. Her heart skipped a beat. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. The figure froze, and for a moment, there was an eerie silence. Then, the person stepped into the light, revealing a disheveled man with a hood pulled low over his face. It wasn't Brian, he was still in custody, but something about this man felt just as dangerous. Before Sarah could react, Max lunged forward, barking fiercely. The man took a step back, startled, but didn't run. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I just need to talk to you." "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her neighbors now forming a protective circle around her and Max. "My name's Eric," the man said, pulling down his hood to reveal a weathered face. I used to know Brian. He owes me something, and I thought maybe he stashed it here before he got caught." "Stashed what?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "What are you talking about?" Eric hesitated, glancing around at the crowd. It's better if I show you," he said, reaching into his pocket. Max growled, and Sarah's hand instinctively went to his collar to hold him back. "Stop right there," one of the neighbors said, stepping forward. It was Mr. Miller, a retired police officer who lived a few houses down. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Eric froze, then slowly pulled out a folded piece of paper. "It's a map," he said, holding it up. "Brian and I were working together. He was supposed to hide something valuable, but I never found out where. I thought maybe this place was connected somehow." Sarah took the map cautiously, her eyes scanning the crude drawing. It appeared to show the layout of her property, with an X marked near the shed in her backyard. Her stomach churned. Why would he hide anything here? "I don't know," Eric admitted. But if you let me dig it up, I'll leave you alone. No way, Sarah said firmly. This is my home. You can't just come in here and start digging. Before Eric could argue, Mr. Miller stepped in. You need to leave now, he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. We'll handle this with the proper authorities. Eric hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine. But whatever's there, it's valuable. Just be careful, he said before disappearing into the night. The gathering dispersed quickly after that, the festive mood replaced by unease. Sarah and Mr. Miller decided to call the police, who arrived shortly after and examined the map. The officers agreed to investigate the area near the shed the next day. That night, Sarah barely slept. Max stayed by her side, his head resting on her lap as if sensing her anxiety. The next morning, a team of officers arrived with metal detectors and digging equipment. It didn't take long before they unearthed a small, rusted metal box buried near the shed. Inside the box were bundles of cash, jewelry, and what appeared to be a ledger with a list of names and numbers. One of the officers whistled low. Looks like Brian was involved in more than just petty theft, he said. The discovery made headlines, and the neighborhood buzzed with speculation. Sarah felt a mix of relief and unease, knowing her home had been unwittingly tied to something criminal. But through it all, Max remained her steadfast protector, proving once again that his instincts were sharper than anyone could have imagined. As the weeks went by, Sarah decided to use the ordeal as an opportunity to bring the community closer together. She organized a neighborhood watch program, with Max as its unofficial mascot. And though life eventually returned to normal, Sarah never forgot the lesson Max had taught her. Sometimes, the ones we trust most have a way of seeing the truth before we do. Brian, the man who had recently moved into the neighborhood, was living alone. He had no wife or children, which might have contributed to him keeping a low profile and avoiding much interaction with the community. After his arrest, it was revealed that he had been using the neighborhood as a base for his petty theft operations, targeting homes he believed were easy marks. The security footage Sarah provided was enough to charge him with multiple counts of theft, and he was sentenced to serve time in jail. He did not return to the neighborhood after his sentencing. Eric, the man who appeared at Sarah's gathering and mentioned the hidden stash, was arrested shortly after his unsettling appearance at the backyard party. His cryptic message about Brian's hidden valuables had raised suspicions among Sarah and the retired police officer, Mr. Miller. The ledger found in the metal box contained not just names but also evidence of transactions linked to illegal activities, which tied Eric to Brian's criminal network. When the police examined the ledger and traced the connections, they found enough evidence to charge Eric with being an accomplice to Brian's crimes. He was taken into custody a few days after his confrontation at Sarah's house. As for the community, the ordeal left everyone more alert and wary of strangers. Sarah, with the help of Mr. Miller, took the initiative to strengthen the neighborhood watch program. They ensured that security measures, like cameras and community alerts, were in place to prevent similar incidents in the future. Sarah found herself reflecting often on how Max had been the hero in this entire ordeal. Without his instincts, she might never have suspected Brian or caught Eric snooping around. The neighbors rallied around Sarah and Max, showering them with appreciation for their bravery and vigilance. While Brian never returned to the community, his brief presence and subsequent arrest served as a wake-up call for everyone. The experience brought the neighborhood closer together, reinforcing the importance of trust, vigilance, and community spirit. Max remained a beloved figure in the neighborhood, often seen walking proudly by Sarah's side, his tail wagging as children ran up to pet him. Sarah's connection with her neighbors deepened, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose in fostering a safe and supportive environment for everyone. The entire incident became a lesson for the community. Sometimes the most unexpected heroes come in the form of a loyal dog, and the most dangerous threats can be hidden in plain sight. Awaken that intuitive spirit in you today, and more than oftentimes, pay attention to what your dog might just be telling you. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to Home of Stories TV. And do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring stories. Drop your comments below, let us know your thoughts.